Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your host.
Welcome to the Do Good X podcast. My name is Stephen Lewis, and I'm a catalyst for positive change in communities and businesses. And for over 2 decades, I've inspired leaders and entrepreneurs to live and work on purpose with intention, faith, and a commitment to their well-being. And I am joined today by my co-host, Kimberly Danielle. Hey, Kimberly.
Hey, Stephen. I see we are both rocking some turtlenecks going on here. Hey, everyone. I am Kimberly Danielle, and I am a communication strategist, a coach, and community builder who comes from generations of faith-driven leaders and entrepreneurs who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. I am really excited about our episode today. So we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but one topic we have really not gotten real deep into is scaling. We talked about it a little bit on the surface in different conversations, but today we are going to get more into it. And scaling for businesses, it's really often celebrated, but we want to dig in to really chat about what does it actually mean? What does it require of us? How do we build something that is successful without really sacrificing our own well-being in that process? And today's conversation is really about the realities of scaling, the systems, the leadership shifts, the emotional resilience that is necessary, and the decisions, because there are some big decisions you'll have to make that determine whether a business can truly scale. And so to explore this, we look forward to our conversation with our guest today, and we are joined by Sarah Michelle Boes. Sarah is a nurse practitioner, entrepreneur, and advocate whose business journey is deeply intertwined with her personal life. After earning her family nurse practitioner degree in 2020, and yes, 2020, during the pandemic, she founded Sarah Michelle NP Reviews, which is an education platform. Her business grew into a 7-figure company within 7 months. 7 figures in 7 months. Wild. And was later acquired by Blueprint Test Prep, where she went on to serve as Chief Nursing Officer. Sarah's story extends beyond rapid growth and acquisition. As a mother to a daughter born with severe congenital heart defects, she has become a passionate congenital heart disease advocate and the author of Meadow and Her 4-Leaf Clover Heart, which she recently launched. Sarah is also an advocate for mental health and female entrepreneurship. Her lived experience with anxiety and OCD informs her efforts to promote sustainable success in high-pressure fields, and she uses her platform to work with and support women building mission-driven businesses. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. Really looking forward to our conversation today and all the wisdom, the insights that you'll bring to this conversation about scaling.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here and share. I like to try to reframe and reshape the journey of entrepreneurship and what it means to scale, but also what it means to exit too, because those are 2 parts of the same equation, but it's a big decision if you decide to go on and sell. And there's a lot that comes alongside that too.
Yes. So let's just get on in. Your story is one that a lot of founders dream of. We said 7 figures in 7 months. You scaled so fast, and scaling that quickly, I imagine, can come with a lot of pressure, a lot of complexity, and decisions that maybe you and others in the same position just weren't prepared for initially. So I'm curious, as we start this conversation, when you launched your business, did you intend to build something scalable, or were you just simply solving a problem that you noticed?
I absolutely was not intending to build something scalable. I didn't even realize I was building something, to be completely transparent. And really, like what I was doing in my business was just solving a problem that I had really lived personally. And once I became a nurse practitioner and finally got to take the exam, I knew firsthand how anxiety inducing that process really was. And at the time, it was, we were in the middle of COVID, anxiety's higher than ever. You're showing up to testing centers and they're just closed and you don't even know in advance. So you've built up all this anticipation. You don't actually get to take the exam. I did that process 5 times where I showed up and didn't get to take the exam. And none of the review courses at the time were talking about the anxiety and the mental health part of the process. They were talking about the clinical concepts and how you prepare clinically for the exam. And so I just really I started building a course of what I wish had existed. And so scale was definitely not the goal. And really, I was just trying to solve this gap because after I took the exam, I really kind of knocked myself for spending so much time, so much money, so much anxiety preparing because it actually was one of the easiest exams I'd ever taken. Like, if you can graduate nurse practitioner school, you can pass the test. You just really have to believe in your ability to do that. And that was a problem that I wanted to help other people solve.
So, what specifically allowed you to grow so quickly in those first 7 months? Was it your course? Was it, I don't know, marketing? Like, what actually was the ingredients? What helped, as you reflect on it, what actually was the thing that actually catalyzed the growth?
I don't think it was one specific thing. I think it was a few beautiful things kind of converging all at once.
Hmm.
First and foremost, like I already touched on, I was solving for a problem that no one else was touching, and that was that mental health and anxiety part of the exam prep process. And I had actually done a review course myself where one of the opening slides was test anxiety doesn't exist. If you fail, it's on you. And so when I just openly came out and transparently said to people, hey, I have a lot of anxiety about taking this thing. I had a lot of panic attacks, but here's what I use and here's what worked for me. That really just kind of resonated immediately because a lot of times, especially in the world of nursing, you're actually told to stuff down your anxiety. And it's a very kind of weed out culture, even in the initial nursing program. And so people were feeling like seen, heard, and validated for the first times in their careers. And I was just that customer. I knew all the pain points. I was so intimately familiar with the process. And I really understood the fear in a way that if you were trying to create this from the outside, that you wouldn't have. I think right alongside that, though, was I was really co-creating with my students in real time. And so this thing became like if someone messaged me and they're like, hey, you don't talk about this in your course, and I'd love an analogy for it. I would literally go into my course that very same day or the next day and add the thing. And I think when you have that level of just like scrappiness and responsiveness, it really builds a lot of trust and a lot of loyalty really fast. And that word of mouth just continued to compound. And when your customers, or for me, my students, felt like they were collaborators, they really become your biggest champions. And so the other piece of hitting 7 figures in 7 months, I did that all by word of mouth. I didn't run a single digital ad. I didn't have an email campaign. I had a Facebook group where people would come, hold up their passing sheet, and they're like, Sarah Michelle helped me pass my exam. I am so grateful for X, Y, and Z. And then that just compounded. Yeah.
Wow. That's
That's
really
amazing.
impressive and
I'm very proud of it.
inspiring.
It really is.
I love the way that you were really intentional about building alongside receiving customer feedback. And I imagine how much more you were able to authentically speak to your customers because you had the same experience really benefited you in building this core loyal audience who became your referral engine and your revenue engine without the need to do much else. So that's really inspiring. Talking a bit about growth and scale, I think sometimes those two words get conflated. And a lot of founders, they are growing revenue, but not really building a scalable infrastructure. What do you think are the early signs as you reflect on your own journey and the journeys of the women who are entrepreneurs that you work with? What are early signs that a business may not necessarily be built to scale?
Yeah, I think just like you said, just getting back to the basic definitions of growth and scale, like growth, the numbers are going up. Great. Scale, that means those numbers are going up without you personally having to hold this whole thing together. And I definitely learned that difference the hard way. And so I think when we're thinking about early signs that a business is not built to scale, it's like you physically cannot sleep through the night because that business needs you. That was a huge one for me. I was literally in that first 7 months, I also worked a full-time job because I'm a crazy person and I had a lot of insecurities and fear about, does this thing continue? Because it just feels too crazy to continue. And so I would wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and I would be fixing website errors because I had this thing going on with my initial website where if someone canceled their subscription, it didn't give them access to the end of their paid month. And so every day I would go in and reset those people and make sure they had their access. I think outside of just like that physical demand is when the demand really starts to outpace your ability to serve it. And the only solution is to work more hours. And I got to a point where I was selling this really cool thing called live study groups, where you got to come live into a group with me and learn from me and talk with me and have conversations. And I capped that at 50 spots because, I'm one human serving these groups. And on the third group that I went to sell, those 50 spots sold out in less than a minute. And I was like, oh, okay, like we're in a new level now. And it was just like this instant moment of clarity, like, oh my gosh, Sarah, the demand is here, but the infrastructure is absolutely not here in any way. And I really I needed a team and I needed a team like tomorrow. I think the biggest thing that I came up against, and I think we'll talk about it in a little part later too, is a lot of people actually told me I couldn't scale because it was a personal brand. And they're like, you have key woman syndrome and nobody's going to want to buy you and nobody's going to want to touch you or you're going to be devalued greatly in the process. And for a moment in time, I started to explore, is that actually true? Have I created a completely unscalable business because it centers around my name and face, like the name of the business was Sarah Michelle MP Reviews. But through my own journey and my own exit, I actually found out that was not true at all. But we can talk about that more too.
Yeah, you proved them wrong.
Amen. And I'm very proud to say that as well.
So, you talked a bit about those early signs. What would you say a founder should be mindful of and intentional about if they are wanting to build a business that actually scales?
Yeah, I think straight from my heart to their heart, I hope anyone out there listening can really truly hear this, but do not wait until you're running on fumes to start building the foundation. I did not really start building infrastructure until I had hit 250 grand. And I decided in that moment, I was so inundated and so overwhelmed, and I couldn't keep pace with working these 100-hour weeks. I ended up hiring a business coach at that time because I was like, I just really have no idea what I'm doing. And I never really intended to build a business, but here I am. And I feel like this is my golden ticket and my golden opportunity, and I can't waste it. So I really wish I started thinking about systems earlier. I started thinking about teams earlier. And I think one of the mistakes that I made, and it was just from my own naivety, and I see a lot of founders make this mistake too, is you believe that the scrappiness and the hustle is going to carry you indefinitely. And I mean, it can get you to that first milestone. I made $1 million in 7 months. That's really cool. But at the end of the day, hustle isn't really a business model. And at some point, that business has to be able to breathe without you. And so I would just say, build the team before you desperately need it and document the processes before you're too overwhelmed to even be thinking straight and doing that. And just really pay attention to your own warning signs too, because for every founder that looks a little bit different. But if I am not sleeping, I know I am not well. And that's a huge one for me personally.
That's good. Hustle is not a business
It
model.
is not.
That's good.
It carried me for a moment in time, but it wasn't going to sustain me.
In 2022, you sold your company to Blueprint Test Prep, which is a milestone for many people who want to be able to exit. So what makes a business attractive for acquisition?
I think for every business, it's going to look a little bit different, but for SMMP, which is a shorthand for Sarah Michelle MP Reviews, it kind of came down to three things. Like, number one, first and foremost, our student outcomes, I mean, they were really undeniable. Like, we had real results, we had real pass rates. We had this Facebook community of like 30 to 40,000 people just like screeching about how much they love the products. Like, that's super attractive when you already have a community and a base built. Like, we had that strong organic audience. And that's not something that a buyer can really manufacture on their own. Like, we really had to build that and work that. And I think that the brand, even today with me outside of it, it still has genuine loyalty attached to it. And there's just a lot of trust in the brand. And I think that makes it super attractive for an acquisition. And for a strategic buyer, like the one that purchased mine, looking to either enter or expand in the space, the community alongside the trust is enormously valuable because it does take time to build and it can't be faked. And it was just, it was an easy conversation for us with this specific strategic buyer because they had tried to enter the nursing space before and it hadn't been super successful. So they already knew how hard it was.
When founders think about exits, which a lot of founders don't think about it, but if this is in front of them and something that they think might be in the realm of possibilities, how early do you suggest, do you recommend that they start really thinking about their steps and what they need to do for a potential exit?
A lot of people will tell you, like, build to sell. Everybody has heard of that business book. Like, you should be thinking about it from day one. I obviously was not thinking about it from day one. I almost entered into the sales process by accident because at the time, like, I was trying to understand, that key woman syndrome thing. Like, what was my business worth with my name and face attached to it? And do I need to go through a strategic rebrand? Like, do I need a 5-year plan of what that looks like? And so I really kind of went to market as a teaser because what I found is your business is worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And so to get an idea of valuation, like, you kind of got to go out there and see what people are going to be willing to pay for it. And, testing the market is not an easy process that kind of becomes a full-time job in and of itself, but it automatically shows you, like, what do buyers see and what do they discount and what are some gaps that I need to close. And I think once you get to a point in your business where you have the ability to zoom out, like, you have the ability to take some time away and even just work with a business coach or whatever that looks like for you, you're already at a point where you could think about selling. And as you build your infrastructure and as you build your processes, you could build with that in mind. But I also want to say, like, it's never too late. Like, you don't have to build to sell. Like, you can kind of stumble into the process like I did too and still have a really successful exit.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Sarah, you dropping some good insights.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from the idea of thinking about, how quickly your business grows and the whole idea of kind of preparing it for sale and that type of thing, that's a lot. And it has, I imagine, significant toll on your mental, emotional well-being, your sleep and everything else. And so what we want to ask you is that, entrepreneurship can come with a lot of pressures, financially, emotionally, mentally. And, you've been open about navigating your daughter Meadows' medical journey, your own experience with anxiety and OCD and building under immense pressure. So how did you make the decision about your business growth during a season, and what boundaries became essential?
There is this really beautiful synchronicity that I just want to mention to my story. And so I actually sold Sarah Michelle MB Reviews while I was pregnant. And I sold it when I was 8.5 months pregnant. And at that time, even though I was 8.5 months pregnant, we didn't know yet that my daughter Meadow was going to be sick. I actually found out 3 weeks after I sold, at 36 weeks, that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this medically complex child who is going to have heart surgery in her first week of life. And so I went from this like extreme high of like, oh my goodness, I've hit the pinnacle, the highest high, I've sold my business, I've done the thing that so many people want to do. And then right alongside it, this huge dip of like, I'm writing the lowest low of my life. And is my daughter going to survive and what that looks like? And so the pressure that I felt during that time, especially, which they called the integration period after an acquisition, and they always talk about like, get through the acquisition, then we're going to deal with the integration and how do we bring all these pieces together into the bigger entity. And I had this just duality all the time where I felt like I really had to show up for my team so they didn't feel abandoned. That was huge for me. I had to show up for the company who made this bet on me that just acquired me. I had to make sure all these things were still running and that everyone felt supported because I was the name in the face of the brand. And so I had to do a lot of that simultaneously while living in the ICU of my daughter. And I'll be really honest and transparent. I did not do that perfectly. I often think about this one particular moment where Meadow was more stable than she had been, but she was still in the ICU. And I kind of had this firm deadline where it was like, if you do not record course videos by this date, that's fine, but we're going to leave you out of the curriculum for next year. And for Sarah Michelle MP Reviews, I'm like, how can there be course videos without Sarah Michelle? Like that feels counterintuitive, especially because there was a lot of uncertainty for my students of like, what does an acquisition mean for them too? And so I left the ICU and I got a hotel room down the street and I was down there recording course videos, and it was the very last thing that I wanted to be doing. And it definitely wasn't the thing I should have been doing, but I just felt that incredible pressure to show up. And I think when I look back on that today, like that moment really taught me so much about boundaries and breaking my own boundaries and what that cost me and what that cost my family. Because it was like one of the first times where I felt like I crossed a boundary that really mattered. And I kind of had to pivot, like, what does my work life look like now as a mom to a medically complex child? Because it's going to be different, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. But it is going to be something new to navigate.
Hmm. Given what you just shared and what you learned during that period of time and how you've kind of redefined what your boundaries are now, what practices or structures do you have in place now to protect your well-being and to be able to be present with yourself and with your family, with Meadow, that you didn't necessarily prioritize earlier on in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, early on, it was pure survival mode. I feel like back then I really measured my worth almost in like my output. And so I said yes to a lot of things because I was afraid of like, okay, what happens if I don't? And I thought people who showed up no matter what, they were super committed and that was a strength. Um, but I think it was really just a lot of fear and a lot of scarcity, like wearing this costume of work ethic. And once I was able to start teasing that apart, I really prioritize today just like permission. So there is permission for me to not be available every moment of a day. And there is permission to let a deadline be someone else's emergency and not mine. Like one of my favorite mantras today that I live by every day is your urgency is not my emergency. And also remembering like I am a human first and I am a brand second, always, no matter what. And I think about that really intentionally today before I agree to do things. And I think really long and hard about, even podcast episodes. I'm like, do I have the capacity to do this? Do I want to show up for it? Because if I do, I'm going to show up as my fullest, brightest, best self. Like that's always my goal. But that capacity and permission piece, it's a muscle that you kind of have to build deliberately and intentionally because there's nothing, and I'm doing nothing in entrepreneurship culture that is going to encourage you to do that, except for me.
And how is Meadow today?
Meadow is incredible. Meadow is 3.5. She had 6 surgeries by the time she was 5 months old. We hope she's about a yearish or so out from her next one. But I mean, yesterday we were doing horseback riding lessons together. We do that every week. And she's just so funny. And I tell people that all the time because I'm caught off guard by it. But I'm like, I never imagined that a 3.5-year-old would just have like so much genuine humor and be able to poke at things already. So I'm just so excited to see the human that she's already turning into and will also be able to turn into in the future.
Well, it sounds like that she is a wonderful young lady. And it sounds like, you are such an inspiration in terms of what you've had to endure to build your business and to attend to your own health and well-being. And so we're glad that you could be here to tell your story.
Thank you so much.
So I want to also ask you, when we think about founders who are pushing for growth or scale, how should they think about building a business that is sustainable and not just operationally, but also tending to their well-being? Because many people are holding very complex lives with a lot of things that are demanding their attention.
I think you have to be really careful and really conscious of watching out for the moving goalposts because it is so easy, so easy to tell yourself, like, when I hit this number, I'm going to rest. Or when I reach this milestone, then I'm going to step back in my business. Then I'm going to zoom out. Or, for me, when I sell, I'm finally going to relax. And I just know it because I've lived it so hard. I've done it again and again. And you know, that goalpost, unfortunately, is just going to keep moving and it will keep moving for as long as you let a business metric define what success looks like for you. And so I think a lot of the real work of entrepreneurship, and I think it's one of the most important things that I could say to any founder is what does success mean to you and redefining success on your own terms. And I'm not talking about success as a number, and I'm not talking about success as evaluation or selling, but I'm actually, this will sound weird because, I'm a nurse practitioner. I like things to be really specific and quantifiable, but like success is a feeling. And I think the beautiful part is you really get to decide what that looks like for you. And for me, like success is a feeling of peace in my body. And I didn't necessarily have that when I was running my business, and I was always trying to get closer to it. But now that I've kind of recultivated my relationship with hustle culture and grinding and entrepreneurship and being a mom and all these other pieces, I'm able to look at success through a new lens.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. It's now time for our resource roundup, where we gather tools and tips and resources that can help entrepreneurs build strong and sustainable businesses. So, with that, we'd like to ask you, what are 1 to 3 resources that can help entrepreneurs learn more about scaling or business, or even think about it differently?
I'll give one book and one podcast. So the book that I'm going to give for scaling specifically, I actually have a different one for exiting, is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. That was so fundamental for me at a point where I was trying to really just take myself out of every decision and every task. And it's really just this inner question of who can do this better than me and how do I find them? And that's a great mindset shift of it doesn't always have to be you. Something that was really fun for me and my husband to share in as we were scaling the business was the podcast My First Million. And it is 2 entrepreneurs that just talk together with other entrepreneurs, with themselves about all kinds of business ideas. And it's so much fun. And it's a little chaotic sometimes, but I think that's good to mix in some fun too. And if you are looking to exit, absolutely read Beyond the Exit by John Root because it's going to talk to you about identity and purpose dynamics that come after a sale that nobody is going to prepare you for. We really idealize what that sale looks like and how awesome that's going to be. But that flip from entrepreneur to employee is a hard reality, and I have lived it. And it is not for me, and that is totally okay. And I just one more, just really quickly, finding community that does look different for everyone, but I'm a part of an entrepreneurial community called Hampton, which is from one of the podcasters from My First Million, where all these people are talking about building and scaling and exiting, and just being in that environment sometimes is really helpful too.
Those are good. Those are really good resources. When we're talking about scaling, and the skills that someone might need during that phase. What leadership skill, if you were to pick one, what leadership skill do founders need most in that phase?
I'm really, really drawn to saying delegation. I think it's very important. But I think if we take it a step beyond that, and what kind of incorporates into delegation is this kind of idea of letting go of being the expert. When you are a solo founder and a solo entrepreneur, you kind of have to be the expert. But at some point in the scaling phase, the people that you're going to hire will know more than you do in their specific lane. And you have to figure out a way to be genuinely okay with that. And if everyone on your team knows less than you, then you kind of really, you haven't built a team, like you've kind of built an audience around you. And so the goal is you want to hire people who make you kind of the least qualified person in the room in their area. And then you want to get out of their way and let them do their genius. And you operate over here in your genius.
So, if a founder wants to position their business for acquisition, what should be their first step?
There's a lot of different ways that you could go about this question. And where I would actually say is deciding your number before you ever meet with a potential buyer. What is the number that is worth it to you that you're going to sell the upside on the other side? And before I ever went to any of the market teasers, any of the meetings, me and my husband, because we are a team, we sat down together, we decided what our number was, you know, and when you get into the room with a buyer, you're going to be so hyped. Like you're going to have the excitement of their vision and they're going to pull you off your foundation so fast you don't even realize it. But if you can have that core anchor and be like, oh no, my number was X, Y, or Z, then it makes it a much less emotional process, which was huge for me because I was pregnant when I was selling. And so like emotions were going to be part of the process regardless. And I can just own that.
So, for those of you who are listening in, if you are a founder navigating growth and looking for a community of purpose driven entrepreneurs who are building intentionally, you can go to dogoodx.org because you do not have to be building by yourself in isolation. And it definitely shouldn't cost you your well being. And Sarah has really shared her story, which illuminates that. You can learn more about our community and experiences, and we hope that you join us. We are going to shift into our last piece here, Sarah, and we are just going to ask you a series of rapid fire questions. Though I will say most guests, they don't do rapid answers.
Yes.
But I'll go ahead and kick us off. What is one value that guides your work?
A value that guides my work always through and through is integrity. Like you have to have integrity in your interactions, whether that be with customers, your team. And I think alongside integrity comes a lot of authenticity. And I feel like that was actually like at our core when I look back on my business. Like if you had asked top 3 core values, authenticity would have been top of the list, probably pretty closely tied with integrity.
What has been your greatest lesson in your entrepreneurial journey?
To always bet on myself. When I started my business, actually a lot of people, they're like, oh, like what's the biggest success of your life? And they think I'm going to say that it's selling my business, but it's actually starting my business because I was so risk averse. I had like no qualifications, no dreams or hopes of starting a business in any way. But I found just like in these little teeny tiny tests of betting on myself, betting on myself, betting on myself, like that truly is the best bet you can make. And there were a lot of people who told me not to sell my business. And they're like, there's so much more growth. There's so much opportunity. And I felt deep in my gut and in myself, I was like, this is the time. And looking back, one, my daughter being sick, hello. But two, the markets quickly shifted after I sold and it was a totally different landscape. And I might not have sold for a long time had I not sold then. And so like that bet on myself and seeing it come true, even in like that like big grandiose way, was huge for me and my self-confidence too.
How has your faith shaped the way that you built your business and lead?
I think when it comes to faith, it kind of like ties back into that faith in myself and betting on myself because when you think about betting on yourself, when you get to the core of it, like what it's saying is you're doing the thing before you're ready. And like I was never ready. Like I wasn't ready when I launched the business. I wasn't ready when I scaled the business. I wasn't ready when I sold the business. And I just kept moving and I kept making the next best decision with the information I had at the time. And, you know, I think that that really shapes how I show up today and how I hope to build things in the future too. Like I am always willing to be a curious novice. It's one of my favorite phrases. Like I love to show up just a little bit before I'm ready and figure it out as I go. And you can learn alongside me. And that's served me well in the past. And I think it's going to serve me well in the future too.
How do you build resilience and navigate challenges that come your way?
Man, I think it's that phrase of like, we can do hard things. Like looking back on my life, I have done some hard things. Sometimes building my business almost like doesn't even come close to the other things that I've done in my life. And I think that I had this incredible opportunity, even though it did not feel like an opportunity at the time when I was in nursing school, where I actually had a public panic attack during a clinical, and I was asked to leave my nursing program because they told me that I was too anxious to be a safe nurse. And that was the first time ever that I had to advocate for my mental health. And it was also one of the first times ever, I know I keep saying this, but it's so true, but it's the first time ever I bet on myself and I was like, I know you guys don't think I can do it, but here, let me show you. And that built so much resilience and so much spark in me. And that's actually what eventually led to me creating my big successful business was I was like, you know, there is no way that I'm the only person with this story out there. And there's got to be other people like me, even if they say that there aren't. And then I found thousands of them. They just came flocking to me. They're like, I'm so anxious. Thank you for saying it. And I'm like, here, like, let me give you a hug. Let me hold your hand through this process. Let me be your guide.
How much of your success do you attribute to your faith versus your own grit, will, and hustle?
I think the faith kind of came from the grit a little bit, all those hard things that I got through, each one of those moments kind of added to my evidence pile that I could trust myself. Because, that self belief just really wasn't something that I started with. And I built it piece by piece by surviving the hard things and keeping going anyways. And, I will also say too, like, looking back, you can see the invisible string, you can see the breadcrumbs that were forming. I do have to say, like, I think there were times and there are times today that the universe is really just conspiring in my favor. But not only was the universe conspiring in my favor, I also still simultaneously had to show up every single day to meet that favor too.
Complete the sentence. Because of my entrepreneurial endeavors, businesses, communities, your students will be more able to do what?
They will absolutely be able to show up with more agency, ownership, transparency, authenticity around their mental health. One of the core strings of everything I do is around advocacy, especially for mental health. I interweave it into the advocacy work that I do today for congenital heart disease as well. And I'm just a huge proponent of like, let me show you how I show up, and you can show up this way too, and you can be yourself too.
That's a beautiful way to end, and you embody everything that you hope to leave these businesses, communities, and these nurses with. So Meadow has a fabulous, wonderful mom, and very grateful for your transparency and what you've shared today on the podcast. Your story is really powerful, and I'm sure many people, in addition to the many people you've already touched, will be inspired by what they've heard.
Thank you so much to you both. I so appreciate your time and just the willingness to let me share my story too, because it's kind of a wild ride and there's a lot of pieces, but I think it's a lot of fun too.
You are such an inspiration and a gift. And thank you for your work and the gifts that you bring to the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who are tuning in, I hope that you have been inspired by Sarah's story, that you have written down some practical tips and resources, that there has been something that you've heard that resonates with you. The Sarah's business model in particular may not be yours, but you might be in the phase of scaling. You might just be in the early stages of building and facing some mental health challenges or challenges with in your family or medical challenges. I just hope that there's something that you heard today from this powerful conversation that really continues to support you on your journey and helps to propel you forward. We hope that you join us again next time. And until then, be well and do good.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.